Hi everyone, before we get underway with our interview with Mike DelPrete, a quick word about property listings and confidence. How do you, as a real estate portal or a real estate website in general, inspire confidence and take users from browsing to actually converting to a lead? Well, the answer is you give them confidence. You give them confidence in that listing. They're going to have questions like, can I afford this listing? But they're also going to have questions like, what would this room look like with a certain type of furniture? Or what is this neighborhood like? Or how much would it cost to renovate this property, right? You can try and build tools that answer these questions internally, or you can do what a lot of other portals have done, for example, Scout24, and you can talk to our sponsor, PropTex. That's PropTex with two X's, who are experts in giving your users or the users of any real estate portal or real estate website generally the confidence to go from just browsing into actually converting to a lead. And now on with the interview. Hello and welcome to the PPW pod, bringing you news, views and interviews from the world of real estate marketplaces and PropTech. I'm joined by Simon as ever. How are you doing, Simon?
Well, I'm back from a few days off, so happy to get into this.
And very happy to be joined by a special guest coming from the US today, Mike DelPrete. How are you?
Hey, good guys. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. So I think you're probably one of our more recognizable guests that we've had on. I think most people will know who you are, but just for those people who maybe don't know, I'm going to give you a little introduction. Mike is I'd say, globally renowned real estate strategist. You're also a scholar in residence at University of Colorado at Boulder. He writes really excellent analysis articles around prop tech and real estate marketplaces, and also hosts a very good podcast named Context, where he interviews people from across kind of prop tech and the broader industry, and also is the keynote speaker usually at the Inman conferences in the United States. And that's where I want to begin. So I recently watched the YouTube video of your presentation at Inman. It was very good. You were kind of talking about basically having people dig into some of the industry numbers that are put out there for better context, right? And one of the examples that you used was CoStar, was specifically homes.com and its traffic. Now, I've heard that Andy Florence and the CoStar bosses were in the room. I imagine some of the other people that you, I don't want to say dug into, but some of the other people featured were in the room. Was it awkward at all when you got off stage?
Great question. Oh, a little bit. I had some people kind of come up to me after what's the right word? I mean, I think it's just calling them out or calling attention to something, right? It's not necessarily good or bad, but like you said, context, right? It's understanding all of the context here, and oftentimes, I mean, everybody's guilty of this. Companies, individuals, right? We'll pick and choose the things we want to focus on and talk about that make us look amazing and great. And I think it's just, for the people in the room or the people that like to think critically and have to make decisions, it's really important to level set and look at all the information out there and not just, listen to one company's narrative or get one data point. But what you really need to do is triangulate, right? There's no ultimate truth. But if you can get more than one data point, then you can start to figure out where the truth might lie and then use that information to make a better decision.
Okay. Actually, and it's worth pointing out that, as you said on stage, and people can find the video on YouTube, none of what these companies are presenting is, false. No one's lying here, right?
Can we,
Yeah.
before, I think for those who are listening who don't know what you presented, it might actually be good context to maybe you can give a summary of what it is you said.
Yeah, I'm struggling to remember it. It's been a couple months. I mean, the title of my presentation was called Propaganda, and it was really kind of just outline or laying out, how you can tell whatever story you want based on the data you choose and the presentation of that data. So you can do little things like adjust the y-axis in a graph to make something look big or small. You can look at the headlines, like these. I use the word surge, like, oh, the real estate transaction numbers in the US are surging. And then you look at what they're actually doing, normalize kind of how a human being would look at it. And, it's anything but. So it was really just providing a lot of examples where, individuals and companies are kind of saying one thing, but when you zoom out and you look at a couple more data points, you kind of get the ultimate truth in all of that, or at least a wider perspective.
So what were two or three of the key takeaways? So, for example, we hear um, uh, homes.com is now number 2. It's overtaken realtor.com and so on. Is that true? Or if we zoom out and look at, as you said, look at the real picture, what's really happening at that level?
It's a great question, because people kind of get in this, like, I don't know, this fight about traffic numbers. And it gets really boring really quick, because you get into this level of granularity that a lot of people don't really understand or care about. So CoStar Homes.com's self-reported traffic numbers are, have them at number 2, right? And it changes over time. Things go up and down. And then, a lot of stock analysts look at independent third-party tools like ComScore, SEMrush, SimilarWeb, and they don't show them as number 2, right? It could be number 3 or number 4. It's just different, right? It's are you measuring traffic by your self-reported numbers or third party numbers? Anyway, you could have a debate about that for an hour, which is the last thing I want to spend an hour of my time doing, because you're not going to get anywhere. But traffic's just like, it's just a waypoint on a destination somewhere. Right? Really, what they're talking about is building traffic for a new web portal. And there's other measures of success, right? You can look at number of customers, you can look at revenue, right? That's how you prove that product market fit for businesses. So I think, again, that's not the right or wrong metric to look at, but let's not just focus on traffic. Let's look at traffic and customers and revenue and kind of any other metrics you can come up with, and then throw it in the context of what's happening, right? Level of investment, looking at what the competitors are doing, looking at time, right? I just love stretching out things over time to see, what's going up, what's going down, how fast is it going, things like that.
Okay, so one of the big reasons that we wanted to talk to you is because you are an expert not only in the US market, but you actually look globally as well, right? So you have this kind of unique perspective. One thing that I have increasingly become aware of over time covering global real estate portals and US real estate portals is that actually it seems to me like the US market, the more I think about it, the less perhaps relevant it is for people operating these marketplaces in other countries. Now, that's just my perspective, I guess. How much from your perspective is there, like, is there a big lesson to be learned for someone operating a real estate portal in, let's say, I don't know, Poland? Can they take lessons from companies like Zillow, or is it just not that relevant because the MLS is such a big difference maker?
Yeah, it's a great question. The short answer is yes. Like, I think anybody can learn lessons from anyone in this space, and you shouldn't be too quick to dismiss someone for some contrived reason. So I'll talk about it. Like, there's 2 areas to look at it. There's technically and thematically. So technically, the U.S. market is very different, unique in terms of 2 major factors: the fact that we have MLSs and the fact that we have buyers agents. I'm not going to fully unpack that now, but if you want to, you can ask me about it.
No,
But those are like,
we've gone through those sort of
yeah.
topics historically.
So those are like structurally very big differences. That means the real estate portals, the whole business model is different. So yeah, that's a big thing. But then thematically, I mean, the U.S. real estate portals, they're in the same business as real estate portals around the world, right? They're meant to go out there, kind of grab consumer eyeballs, build an audience, show those audience real estate listings for sale, and then be able to connect, basically make a connection, right? Typically to a real estate agent, but make a connection, and that can be where things get monetized, or it could be on the listing side of things. But thematically, that's it, right? You have to attract consumers. So what's the product to attract and retain consumers? You have to communicate and sell to agents. Oftentimes you have to do something with leads, right? You have to generate and distribute and nurture and follow up with leads. So there's a lot of great examples there. And I think Zillow is definitely a world leader in terms of their whole lead generation and distribution machine, right? They've trialed that for a decade, A/B tested different things, tried different things. So absolutely, why wouldn't you take a look at that, see what works, see what doesn't?
Actually, can we dive into that a bit more? You're saying they're the world leader in it. What is it that they do that you think is better than everyone else in terms of lead generation and then lead distribution? What's the secret sauce from an outside in perspective that truly makes them unique?
I mean, from a lead generation standpoint, standpoint, first you have to build consumer audience. So let's put that to the side. I mean, it's a form on a website with a button, right? And you just need to make that. It sounds really simple, but you need to make that as compelling and as easy to get through as possible with just the right information. And then you need to understand what people want, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, "Oh, I can't wait to talk to a real estate agent today," right? Talking to a real estate agent is just a means to an end. People get excited about property. So, there's what Zillow's done recently when they bought Showtime for $500 million, and this is something Redfin has had for a while, is just a request a showing. Oftentimes, right? You think about the form, it's like, well, here's my name and email, but I really just have a question, or actually, I just want to see the property. So let me just fast forward, show a little calendar, and do that. And you know what? Showing a calendar with dates and times is easy, but on the back end, syncing that up so it's real, like with agents and availability and schedules, that's hard. So from a lead generation standpoint, that's one thing. And then, in terms of distributing leads, I mean, from what I've learned about distributing leads to agents, it's a real big game of carrot and stick. That's it. You need to build a network of agents that you send this stuff to. You need to incentivize them to kind of play by your rules in certain ways. And then the stick is, I mean, you kind of need to, I guess, penalize them if they don't, right? If I send 20 leads to you, Simon, and you don't get back to anybody, well, you shouldn't get any more leads, right? But then how do you track that? Right? How do you track that? You have to build an app, and I have to make you use the app, and I have to make you kind of log your call. It's complex, and Zillow's got a whole product team, and they've got a whole call center behind this. Because the other thing that needs to happen, the last thing I'll say is, once a lead, who's a human being, by the way, right? Leads are humans. Once a lead clicks that button, time to contact is super important. Um, when I teach my students at my university class, we have a segment on portals, and we talk about Zillow, and I always ask for some volunteers, and I have them go on Zillow, like right there, fill out the form, and then we see what happens, right? And within 60 seconds, phone call, text message, email, voicemail, like it's all happening. That just doesn't happen, right? That has to happen on purpose.
Yeah, and I think, but you raise an interesting point about when you're in a MLS environment and buy side, sell side, um, lead generation about a property is about getting it to a buyer's agent. Otherwise, you're already working with a buyer's agent and they handle it for you. Um, the time to respond is quite critical. When you're working in other markets where it's only sell side, okay, there is no buyer's agent. The agent itself in many markets is the sole representative of the property. So it's almost like, well, if I take a few hours to get back to you, what are you going to do about it? If you're interested in the property, bad luck. You're going
Yeah,
to have to wait
yeah,
for me. There's a little
yeah.
bit of a micro monopoly happening in that world. Is the function of Zillow being super probably best practice at lead management a function of the structure of the market, the MLS structure, versus what would happen in other markets where you have a sell side only?
It's a really good point. If I need to get a license here in the U.S., I have to go to the DMV. Like that's it. It can be fast and awesome, or it can take 3 hours and be a total pain. That's kind of what I have to do if I need a license. So, yeah, no, I mean, generally, I agree, and it's a really good point. Like people will deal with whatever pain you throw at them, delay wise, technology wise, if that's the only path to get to that house. Um, so maybe it's a little bit more. I don't know. It's hard to say like, oh, but so it doesn't matter, right? I think the direction where portals are going are trying to generate more seller leads and be more of a value added provider, and that does kind of end up reflecting on them at some point. I wouldn't advise like totally ignoring it, but you're right. It's less important if you kind of walk through the whole scenario of what you're trying to get to.
Yeah, I think where if I was a portal operating in say Spain, Italy, clearly a lot of Southeast Asian markets, Latin American markets where it's non-exclusive agency, where there'll be like there could be
Mhm.
5 to 10 people representing a property, purely because it's working on the theory that I'll walk around, I'm an agent, I'll find some properties, I'll throw them up, and hopefully I'll generate some leads. That's where I think the role of the portal makes more sense, to look at what a Zillow is doing and saying, well, I'm the intermediary. I'm here putting my brand behind this potential transaction. And if you're sending your lead to an agent and the agent is one of 5 representing the property, maybe the role of the portal should be to move the lead around the 5 different people who represent that property rather than just send it to the one, because sometimes that property's on the website 5 times. Right? It
Yeah.
just happens to be the one time they click on it. So maybe there's some lessons they could learn in those markets from Zillow.
I think that's a good point. It's entirely right. If you look at the outcome you're trying to get, you can work backwards from that. I think the other area where a lot of portals might look at Zillow and others, right? Zillow is not the be all end all in the real estate portal. It's just one of many. Um, it is adjacencies. When you start talking about mortgage and title and do we just focus on one thing or do all these things? I mean, that is especially, like, I was in that role when I worked at Trade Me in New Zealand. I was head of strategy, right? Everybody has that PowerPoint deck with concentric circles, right? Once we get into mortgage, then we're going to make trillions of dollars. It's really hard. And I think, for anybody in that position, it makes a lot of sense to look around and see what some of the leaders like Zillow, REA Group have done when they start thinking about integrating mortgage. And now with Rocket and Redfin and Mr. Cooper, I mean, that game just got amped up tenfold here in the US.
Let's be I think that's actually a good segue. Tell us what your views on this Rocket Redfin deal.
I mean, I published some stuff around that. So you can take a look at that if you want to dive in after this. But I think the main thing I would say is it's not a non-zero sum game, right? Um, this is not necessarily bad for Zillow, right? Everybody's trying to get to the same destination. It's just we're going to take different paths, right? Zillow's been doing it from the portal standpoint, and now we have Rocket, a mortgage behemoth, coming at it from the mortgage standpoint. And when I say it, I mean this idea of an end-to-end ecosystem that seamlessly combines brokerage, search, mortgage, and maybe title insurance here in the US. That's been a holy grail people in the US have been in search of, for at least a decade. So we have a new player and they're well resourced. So we're going to see what happens there. But it's kind of coming after the same goal from a totally different angle. And then I mean, I will say, like, as these companies try to, come in and create their own ecosystems, their own walled gardens, they just get bigger. Like, say, Rocket was this, and then they acquired Redfin, and it's like a little bit bigger. And then over here you have Zillow, kind of like this. And when Rocket acquired this mortgage service or Mr. Cooper, it got a little bigger. There's a finite pool of transactions. And if these ecosystems are getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, guess what? There's more transactions that'll get sucked up in those ecosystems, and there's less for everyone else. And it doesn't mean, this big company is going to fail. It's really the agent down the road, who did 6 deals last year, and this year she does 5. She doesn't know why. She doesn't think about it, but that's where it comes in. Because if you're not in that ecosystem, you're not, and you're gonna lose out because there's just gonna be just a little fewer deals coming down to you.
Okay, I promised last question on Zillow, but this is one that I absolutely had to ask. So, for context, my wife is American, and she was absolutely like flabbergasted to learn that Zillow is not profitable the other day. She said something like, "Well, you're always talking about how Rightmove and all these other portals are so profitable. How is it that Zillow isn't profitable? It must be the biggest, most important real estate portal in the world, right?" And my answer to her was something like, kind of mealy mouthed. I had probably said something like, "Well, it has a different business model, and it doesn't quite do the same as portals do in other countries." When you look at a company like Zillow and you look at a company like Rightmove, now we're obviously talking about two kind of almost ends of the spectrum in terms of like risk taking there. How do you answer my wife's question? How do you say, well, actually, this massive company, this most popular portal in the world, isn't really profitable because, like, what's the answer?
I mean, first you got to say what is profitable. Like, what metric are you
Net,
talking
like
about?
net, I mean, I think
Free cash flow
my
would be a
head,
good
top of
starting
my head,
point.
I don't think it's generated any cash since something like 2012.
So I would
That
I
is
would
off the top of
disagree.
my
I
head.
would disagree. I would disagree on that. There's a couple metrics. So to Simon's point, free cash flow. In the financial statements, you can look at net cash from operating activities. And that's the amount of cash any business generates from the core business, right? It excludes financing and investments, and acquisitions, these kind of one-off things, right? If you sell shares or you do stock options or stock-based compensation. And then another metric, which you're probably talking about, Ed, is just net income. And that's a GAAP metric, generally accepted accounting principles. And that include the thing about that is that includes non-cash expenses. So if we're Zillow and we're paying Simon 100K in cash and then another 100K in stock-based compensation, well, what does that cost us? Is it 100K or is it 200K? In the cash flow, it costs us 100K. In net income, it costs us 200K. So you really, and I'm not trying to deflect the question, but this idea of like profitability is a great idea of where you need the context, and there's a lot of propaganda out there. So when you look at Zillow, and just in terms of cash flow and their cash generation abilities, it's a monster. It generates, on average over the past 10 years, like hundreds of millions of dollars of cash every year. Is it net income profitable? No, it isn't, because that metric includes all these non-cash expenses, like stock-based compensation is a huge one for that business. And it doesn't, if Zillow generates hundreds of millions of dollars and decides to use some of that to buy back stock, that impacts the GAAP profitability, but they're still generating income, right? It's still good for the business. So you really got to slice and dice. But just to wrap it up, I think there is this common misnomer, and I'm guilty of this, years ago when I first started looking at the space. But there's this common misnomer that Zillow is unprofitable and it's never been profitable. And yeah, that might be true on a net income standpoint, GAAP, but that's an accounting artifact. In terms of just the cash generation potential of the core business, it is very, very profitable.
Okay. As a follow-on question to that, so I recently wrote about Jeremy Waxman, the CEO of Zillow, recently came out and said, uh, we aim to be a business with 45, I think he said 45% EBITDA margins and 5 billion in revenue, but he didn't give a timeline. Now, his predecessor, Rich Barton, had previously given pretty much the same prediction or the same targets back in 2021. Now, to me, it seems like, hang on, you said in 2021 you were going to do this by 2025, yet you're repeating the same thing in 2025. Like looking at this as somebody who reports on it, I'm thinking, shouldn't you not be saying anything about this? You didn't hit the target that you stated in 2021 and you're restating it in 2025. Like, how much of a kind of collective memory is there in the industry for things like that, and people saying they're going to do things and then, not doing them?
I mean, it's a great question, and you can look at the history of Zillow and a number of other companies and see what they said and what they've
Yeah, I'm
done. And
sure there's a whole load of other examples of companies doing similar things, and this is kind of adjacent to what you were talking about on stage at Inmen of, how companies present themselves.
yeah, I think there's a risk of drinking the Kool-Aid, for any business. There's some businesses out there, and Zillow's pretty good at this, that make a really compelling case. Like, you can't help but listen to them and be like, yeah, this sounds good. Super app, yeah, awesome. I can totally see this. But then, for people like us, you have to pull back and look at the context and be like, well, did you say this before? And if you said it before and it didn't happen, what do I need to believe to be true for this to eventuate, right? Those are great questions to be asking. And yeah, Zillow and other companies are guilty of that, saying the same thing and not delivering in certain areas. And to be fair, the context of the market, like 21 was the best year in real estate ever. 22, half of it was great and the other half was horrible. And then it's just kind of remained horrible since then. And Zillow's revenues are very much tied to the state of the market. But so there's the market conditions. But what I will say is, like, Zillow's big push right now is in the adjacent space, right? It's expanding Flex to all these enhanced markets, and it is endeavoring to attach Zillow home loans to as many of those leads as possible. And in general, Zillow can generate like 10 times the revenue from a home loan than it can just a lead. It looks to be working, right? If you look at the metrics and you look at the numbers, it looks to be working. So something happened over there. Uh, I don't know, maybe the last 12 months. Um, Zillow as a company is kind of really focused on this expansion, and it seems to be working in a way that it hasn't in the past. So I wouldn't want to just look at the high level numbers and dismiss it and say like, oh, you've said it before. Something's working.
Okay. Let's look outside the US. When you look outside the US into, say, the European markets, what do you see and what are your views?
I mean, it's such a broad question. I've always liked the portals in the UK, Rightmove and Zoopla, because they were a classic case study, Rightmove of staying in your lane. Like, we're going to do one thing, we're going to do it super well, and we're not going to kid ourselves that just because we can do this one thing gives us the right to compete and win in, all these other areas. And then Zoopla kind of famously expanded. Like, well, we can't win in this one thing, so we're just going to do everything and see what fits. And then when Silver Lake came in, they kind of divested that off, which was this acknowledgement that diversification strategy didn't, I hesitate to say didn't work, but it wasn't 1 + 1 = 3. It was probably like 1 + 1 = 2.1 or something like that. Um, but it's interesting just to kind of watch and see how various portals what their strategic playbooks are and how they're expanding. Right, it's seller lead generation. Okay, we need to qualify these leads. We can't just email them off to people. We need to stand up call centers around there. And then yeah, I mean, again, you can look at Hemnet in Sweden and come up with one story. You can look at Axel Springer and Aviv Group and what they've done there, and there's another story. So, in general, there's a lot out there, but I'm happy to kind of dive into specifics.
Let me rephrase the question a bit. If you're talking to portals in the US and you said, hey, we started off by saying, hey, what lessons can be learnt from the US and sort of taken out, right? Now let's reverse that question. What lessons can be learned from outside and taken to the US market?
I don't know if we can take it in, but every portal in the US should be paying attention to Hemnet and really understanding the power of vendor funded marketplaces, market leadership and concentration. And I don't know, the power of ARPA, or just being able to kind of raise prices for a transaction that happens every 1, 5, and 10 years, right? It's great. And REA in Australia, kind of the same thing. It's not, again, not to say that you can flick a switch and just do that in the US. I don't know that you'll ever be able to. But it's interesting looking at that, right? If I were at Zillow and I was on the product team and I was building out this listing showcase product to feature products, I'd look at Hemnet's product roadmap. They've done some very interesting things around that where they're focused solely in promoting these listings, building value to consumers and agents, and then charging for that. And then I also like
Do
what
you think
Scout.
you can do that in the US? You think you could go, by the way, not only is it 6% commission, we also want an additional marketing fee on top? Or do you think the agent would have to give away some of the commission to get the marketing fee? And then the point is, why would they do that?
Well, I mean, it's happening. Zillow's listing showcase product is exactly that. It's charging the agent, right? So the consumer. I don't know that we can charge consumers yet, maybe
Sorry,
ever,
not
but
consumed by the home seller. I mean, the home seller.
yeah. So the home seller. So the home seller's not paying for it. The agent is, right? So it, Zillow has a listing showcase product to promote the agent and the listing that they're selling to agents.
Yeah,
So that
which
sounds
is that. But that's what happens in most other markets. What's happening in Sweden is then the agent's passing that on to the home seller. So it's actually, by the way, here's my commission, and here's another fee called a marketing fee that, yeah,
I don't think, like right now, I don't think that could happen in the US. Nobody's saying that could happen. I mean, I know CoStar in the past has said like, hey, that would be great to get to that point. But it's incredibly unlikely. Uh, but I don't know. I mean, the mechanics of who pays for it it's obviously interesting and important, but from a product standpoint, it's not really any different. You're building a product that you can sell to the home seller team, right? Whether it's the vendor or the agent, you have to provide value. Right now, the agent's going to pay for it in the US. So how do you provide value to the agent? And that's thinking about generating other seller leads. And to me, yeah, that starts ticking boxes, right? Oh yeah, REA, Hemnet, Scout24, like these Bright
yeah, but
Move.
I disagree. I think it actually is relevant, and let me explain why. So if it's the agent paying for part of their commission for the additional marketing, you have to think, well, what's important to them? Yes, selling the house is important, but if I have the sole agreement as in the US, as in Australia, as in the United Kingdom, to sell the house. And as long as there's pretty good demand in the market and the house is priced fairly, I'm going to get my commission, right? It's not really, and I'm not going to fight for that extra 10,000 or 20,000 for the home seller. It's no point, because how much am I going to get? I'm going to get an extra $600. Forget it, right? I'd rather just get the deal done. So to get money out of my pocket as the agent, it's really about, well, what is the value to me? And the value to me is going to be having my brand there. So we discovered at REA quite easily that I could sell my feature properties and get people to pay a lot extra when their brand, the agent's brand, was all over it. Okay, because that's what they were like. Oh, now I see. Because then they could have blocks of listings with their brand on it, so it looked like they dominated a suburb. Now, if you're talking to the home seller doesn't care about the agent's branding. What the home seller cares about is that they can see that, because it's all about ego, their big house at the top of the search with a big ass picture, right? That's what they're looking for. So depending on who the target audience is, depends on subtleties around the product and how it is presented, and how you give and the tools for marketing it. Because part of the marketing is not only the what you see in the product, but the marketing. So you then have to, with REA has an outsourced sales team of 30,000 people running around selling their products. Think about it. The agents are selling REA products because it's not coming out of their pocket. It's coming out of someone else's pocket. So it's not impacting that commission. So I think it does actually impact a lot of how you think about the product and how you think about marketing that product and packaging that product.
Yeah, I mean, you started off saying you disagree, but I feel like that's exactly what I was saying. So, like, I don't disagree with anything you said. And in fact, it's the same thing, right? Zillow's building a product that the agent has to pay for. So the benefit they're building is to the agent. So it's all the agent branding stuff. And the end result there is generating seller leads. That's not leads for the listing they're trying to sell. It's other sellers, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah. So the next question then is, if you're, and I actually want to go back to the US for a second, because this is what I find interesting. If you're CoStar and you've got homes.com and you're going up against realtor.com and Zillow, I got two questions. One is, with realtor.com, do they have a chance, or are they just going to get trampled in the $1 billion of marketing that's coming through, or has come through, or continue, I guess, being spent? And the second is, what is homes.com doing anything materially different to differentiate itself in the market?
I mean, I can render an opinion, but I'm trying to think of the data in this. I mean, listen, if Homes.com keeps spending $1 billion a year and running Super Bowl ads into the future, that will of course put pressure on all the other portals, right? I don't know if they will. I'm not smart enough. I don't get paid enough to know if they will or not, right? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But if you look at how much they're spending and the revenue they're getting out of that, and the stock price and every other business that CoStar owns, they need to balance, right? They don't have an unlimited supply of money, and they're looking to acquire domain in Australia, and they got on the market in the UK, right? There's only so much spent. So if they continue spending, yeah, it's a threat. If they don't, or they have to start pulling back, it becomes less of a traffic threat. It doesn't. And again, I've kind of analyzed that too. I mean, their additional traffic doesn't come at the expense of any other portals. Like, the traffic just kind of it literally materializes out of thin air, this additional traffic. And that's because people will look at one, two, three, four websites to make sure they're seeing all the available inventory. So what I'm saying is 100 new users for homes.com doesn't come at the expense of 100 users from Zillow. It's just additive on top of that, so it becomes less of a threat to the other portals than you might think. And then anything materially different. It's been a while since I've dipped into the product. I know a while back they'd kind of famously said they were going to hire, I think, 1,000 people to go into neighborhoods, right? Photograph and video, and provide really, really detailed neighborhood information. At the time, that seemed different, but materially different, is a bigger question. And I think where things would get materially different in the US is if they took a page out of, say, actually many other markets, but I'm thinking of Australia specifically, this idea of exclusive inventory. right? Consumers care about inventory. And if any of the portals can figure out a way to display any inventory that no one else has for a period of time, I would say that probably falls into the material bucket more than a lot of neighborhood information.
And what about this? Your property, your lead, your mantra. How does that impact what they do, or does it? Is it just words around the outside, and it does fundamentally the same thing?
It's a great, well, it's your listing, your lead,
Your
right?
listing,
So
your
if,
yep.
yeah, if I'm an agent and I've done all the hard work to secure a listing for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and I put it online, and I sell it, it goes to the MLSs, and then it goes on all the portals, and oftentimes my name is not on there, my picture's not on there. Zillow's selling that space to the highest bidder, and it could be Ed, who just got his real estate license last month, is a total ding dong, doesn't know what he's doing, right? It's like, but it's my listing, and now you're making money off that. So this idea of your listing, your lead is like a great rallying call to those aggrieved agents that don't like Zillow, a multi-billion-dollar company making money off their listing. So I think it resonates from more of like an emotional standpoint. It's there's going to be a different name and number on the listing, so that matters. Like I'll get the calls instead of Ed. And then, but at the end of the day, like somebody still needs to deal with those leads, right? It's about lead management. It's great if I get all the leads, I still need to call them back. I still need to talk to them. So I still need that structure in there. And kind of to your point earlier, Simon, like if it's an exclusive listing agreement, like I'm not incentivized to call them back. You're interested in the property? Cool. Like, I might get back to you tomorrow because it has to go through me, no matter what. Whereas a buyer agent, like someone like Ed, he's hungry. He paid for the lead. He wants to make it happen. So there's different motivations.
What about on the consumer side? So you're talking about the agent side of the homes.com proposition there, which I completely understand. As a consumer, as somebody looking for a home, I think maybe I've drunk the homes.com Kool-Aid a little bit here, but it seems to me like the Zillow model of if I become a lead for a house, I could be talking to somebody who has no idea about the house. That does seem to me like a poor experience. And that's not the way it works in the rest of the world. I mean, having kind of looked at homes.com and its model and thinking about how it might compare to Zillow and Realtor, yeah, maybe I have kind of drunk the Kool-Aid a bit because it does seem to me like they have a unique proposition for both the agent side and the consumer side. But I've never tried to buy a house in the US. How true will that proposition ring with US home buyers? Is it actually a big differentiator, or is it something that people have become so accustomed to the Zillow model where they're connected with somebody who may or may not know the property that it kind of doesn't matter?
Yeah, I think you need to go back to this concept of jobs to be done. Clayton Christensen, famous business author, wrote about this. These jobs to be done. Like, what are consumers actually after, right? If they're on a website and they find a property, what do they want? And I'm not going to give you the answer because I don't know, and it's different for everybody. But you can assume that a bunch of consumers want to just see the property. That's it. I just want to go see the property. And you can imagine a bunch of consumers have a question about the property or the neighborhood. And, I don't know what the answer is for the first one, but in the case of the second, yeah, who better to ask a question than the listing agent? The person, like, they out of your pool of all available real estate agents, they're probably going to know those answers. So of course, sure, that makes a lot of sense to get to that person. But again, if I'm a lead, a consumer, that's what I want. And it's also important to me to hear back from somebody, a human being, in a short amount of time. And, I want that human being to be able to help me. So, yeah, you can imagine a scenario where somebody in a call center in, Illinois calls me up and they know nothing about Denver, but they're just talking to me. Is that useful or not? So I think it's a mix of all that. But, to answer your question, like, is that resonating with consumers? I mean, you can interview 1,000 people and get all these talking heads giving their opinion, but I would say, well, just look at the data. Like, if the whole thing works, if the whole business model works, you will see agents signing up and paying for it. You'll see consumers going back to the site, over and over again. So that's the data that I would look at to see, like, is it actually working?
Yeah, a simple and very fair answer to be.
I'm curious, right? Because I mean, I have a house in the US, and I sort of look at it across the three sites. Okay, and I look at and homes.com has amazing detail about the house, and I look and I go, yeah, that's pretty accurate. And then I look at Zillow, and it's got a lot of detail, and it's pretty accurate. Homes does more detail, interestingly enough, about it. Realtor's got nothing, right? As a consumer experience, comparatively speaking, it has almost no data. What is realtor.com in danger here of just losing first, second place ish, however you want to define it, just on the consumer experience side? Because it seems to me it has a comparatively less attractive consumer experience.
I mean, I'd have to dip into it again and use it. So actually, I mean, counterpoint, and again, it's all about the data. Like, I've used realtor.com recently, and I've heard from other people, and they're like, "Oh, I like it. That's my favorite site." So I assume it's kind of ticking off consumer boxes. But let's just kind of put that to the side. Like, if realtor.com or any portal is kind of falling behind from a product standpoint, does it matter? Are they going to lose? Um, Again, I remember being in New Zealand looking at these websites, and the funny thing about classified sites is the quality of the product only matters so much, but really what people care about are the listings, right? They want to see a lot of listings, they want to see all the listings, and they want to action those as quick as they can, whether it's asking a question, going to a tour, or whatnot. So I'm not sure how important it is, for most consumers, what level of data they need to have for that. I think it's all secondary to just having all the listings. And in the US, with clear cooperation, there's potential fragmentation around listings and exclusivity and where they appear. That's suddenly going to become the most important thing. Um, and I'll just kind of land that plane by going back to my answer to Ed. You can also, like, at the end of the day, what works for a business can be measured by some metrics. So if we say, are they going to lose? Traffic is an interesting lead indicator, but really it's kind of revenues, right? I would be tracking Realtor.com's revenues over time and see how those are changing compared to Zillow and Homes and Redfin and the others in the place. And if they start to lag, then you say, all right, yeah, for whatever reason, something isn't clicking anymore.
Okay, I'm going to segue from that into another kind of product question. It's a question that I'm probably anticipating Simon asking anyway here. We have been speaking a lot about the future of search and about AI and how AI might impact search. What is your like a general question? What is your view on how AI and perhaps agentic search might impact some of these businesses? I know Simon's quite, I guess, outspoken on it. He said you went as far as saying REA Group may go out of business the other day, Simon.
No, actually, I never said they go out of business. No, I, as with all good journalists who love to ask a leading question, make sure you quote correctly. I said it could provide challenges for
I'll have to
businesses
look up the
because,
actual quote. But anyway, what is
yeah,
your view on the whole thing, Mike?
You know what? I'm probably more on the pragmatic, pessimistic, bearish side of that. So it's like, well, show me some examples, right? I haven't seen any example, yet in the portal space of AI really materially moving the needle for folks. Um, and I think there's an interesting thing about real estate. So my personal opinion is, part of the fun is the adventure of searching, right? People, when it comes to real estate, like, there's certain things, certain products with real estate, it's the highest transaction value typically in somebody's life. So when that happens, part of the fun is daydreaming, right? Daydreaming about, what if we lived here? What if we lived here? Looking through all the houses, wanting to know you have the entire spectrum out there and you're kind of filtering it on your own, as opposed to someone coming to you and saying, "Hey, Ed, here's the perfect house for you. I've mined all of your data. I've looked at your credit card statements. I've looked at your search criteria. Here's the one for you." I think people want to go through the search, so you have to, like, figure out a way to include that in there. Is Yeah. So pause on that one, and then, well, what's the role of a real estate agent? The real estate agent could bring additional insights, information, or properties to my attention that I'm not already aware of. Could AI do that? Sure. It could get to know me a little bit more and say, like, hey, Mike, instead of your normal save search for all properties for sale in this zip code or this metro. You know, here's some other things you might be interested in. So I think seeing it as an additive component onto that core process where consumer behavior still wants to look at everything and filter on their own, that's probably where the opportunity lies. But haven't seen like, I don't know, I haven't seen anything in that space that's material quite yet.
Yeah, I think the way to think about it is the given agentic search is only at its very early days, right? So clearly it's not going to walk in and change the world in 30 seconds. No different to back in 1999, 1998 when REA or realestate.com.au was formed, or Domain, or a bunch of other businesses that I was involved in at that time. It wasn't changing the world in 30 seconds. But here we are 20 years later. In fact, it wasn't like 20 years, it was like 10 or 15 years later, and it had changed the world. And I think the danger that comes for everyone is to underestimate what's going to happen, because then you'll be like the newspapers going, oh, what happened? And then you're just spending a lot of money trying to catch up, okay, in that process. And I think the people who are going to benefit from this, those who have the view that, well, I can't determine today exactly what's going to happen, but I better embrace. Okay, and I better embrace quite quickly. So if you look at something like the latest Delhi 3 update, if you're doing um, property, what is it called? Showroom, what is it, online showroom, where the things that the phrase is called, it's fundamentally now can do that, right? And this is an update that's come through that anyone can go and the quality of what they're doing is enormous. And this came out last Friday. Okay, so the speed of innovation on that side is enormous. The people using AI-driven searches, so the chat GPTs, perplexities of the world as their search engine now, is growing rapidly because of the quality of results, and the presentations of the results far outdoes what Google can do now. It just makes it easier to consume the outcomes. So I think the real issue will be, yes, there'll be those people who want to have an exploratory view of the world. They want to just meander their way through and find out and explore and see what's available to them. And then there'll be a group of people who are wanting to have like a little AI co-pilot with them. So they want to do the exploring, but they also go, but what else? What am I missing? Right? Because that's going to be the question. What am I missing? That's why they search on multiple sites. So then AI is sort of like this meta engine sitting on top that's going, well, you looked here, you looked here, not only from a website perspective, but also from a geography and an experience perspective. Oh, you want a playground, you want this, you want that. Have you thought about this area of the city or whatever that you've never thought about before? Because it's just a blind spot. And then there'll be those who don't want to stuff around. They just want to get into finding an outcome, whether it's rentals in particular will be, I think, because if I'm looking to rent, I don't want that to be a wonderful exploratory experience. I just want to find a place to rent that meets my requirements, because I'm not buying it. I'm just going to rent it for a year or whatever period of time. Or I'm an investor. I want to find which one of these properties on this site is going to give me the best return. Now, AI will do that job 10,000 times better than any other spreadsheet or any other set of algorithms. So we always have to be mindful of the use cases around this and why people are using these sites. And that's why I think it starts to chip away at the experience that people have. So if you've got a rental site, you better be embracing AI as someone's co-pilot, because they want to get to the answer fast. If you're running a portal and you've got people using it for investment perspective, you want to give them a tool that allows them to find the best rental yield. You know, what's a relatively undiscovered opportunity, okay, on the site, especially in a commercial world, I think will be very, very useful. And then I think third is if I'm exploring if I'm not a tire kicker and just sort of hanging around and bored, and which I bet a lot of people must be, because there's no way there's, what was Zillow's visitation, 350 million visits, right? Come on. They're all buyers. Give me a break, right? They're not. They're a lot of tire kickers, people just bored, wanting to see check other people's properties. So I think that's where you need to have these almost like a co-pilot that helps you with your search. that's where I think that the opportunity comes and the danger comes, right? These I wouldn't be surprised if we see some over time, not a long period of time, by the way, some important shifts in eyeballs and where they're looking and the roles. Okay. And I think the role of and this is where I think the US is so different from the rest of the world is if people are looking on multiple sites in the US and they've got no idea how an MLS works, because everyone's just pulling from the same MLS. But come on, right? So one would probably assume that a majority of the serious buyers are looking at just one site to get a great experience. And I think these meta searches, which is a far more sophisticated version of a Matura or Trovit, okay, will be very useful in other markets where all listings aren't on one site. So if you're in the United Kingdom and I'm on Rightmove, but what's on prime location, just in case I'm missing something? Oh, what's on the market? Have I found anything extra in that? And that does that job for them. So I think I would be a little bit skeptical if I said it's not going to have an impact. Okay, will it be? Oh well, it happened yesterday, and why haven't we had an impact today? No, but I tell you, I sat in meetings back in 2000 with a bunch of newspaper guys. Actually, here's a very very quick and good story. Is when I did the deal for News to invest into REA, and I was going there and I was talking to a guy called Peter McCourt. I think I'm past the statute of limitations here, 25 years. Okay. And I go into Peter McCourt, who was the chief operating officer of News Limited, the newspapers, who was doing the investment. And he was signing the investment, because it was an investment of $2.25 million. That's it, into REA. And he goes, this is not a real business, as he signed it. And that's something that's stuck with me for a quarter of a century. Okay. How wrong was he? Looking at what's now a $35 billion business, and News owns 2/3 of that. Okay. And that shows how the incumbents, who are so invested in what they're currently doing and their heads are buried in that bucket of sand, sometimes get sideswiped. And that's a great example. Do you want to own newspaper classifieds today? Do I see any hands up? No, no one does. So that's why I'm let's say more bullish than bearish on the impact of AI on these businesses. It's easy to have your head in the sand or hope it doesn't have an impact.
Right. And I think in no case should we say, oh yeah, put your head in the sand. It's kind of finding out where the opportunity is. And I think the one thing I just want to add to that, Simon, is in many cases, I think the real estate portals globally are going to be best positioned to leverage AI because of the data they have.
I agree. If you have great quality data, then you're far better positioned. But if you don't, which comes back to my feeling around Realtor.com from an outside in perspective, is if Homes.com has great data, Zillow has great data, Realtor.com, not so good. So where's its value to a Complexity or a ChatGPT or whatever powered search versus a traditional Google powered search? Where's the value it's adding? And my guess is it's not. And that's where I think the real risk comes.
And there's, I mean, as you're saying this, there's real questions around who actually owns that data and who can use it, right? Is it the real estate portal? Is it the MLSs? Is it the brokers? Is it the homeowners? And I'm not smart enough to know the answer to that, but it sounds like a big mess, and it's kind of playing out with OpenAI and how they're training their models. The same thing will happen in real estate, and people are already fighting over that data. So it's going to be real. Like, if it doesn't matter, and we can start a company tomorrow and just scrape all those websites and get all the listings, and then throw some AI stuff at it, like that's a lot different, and that's a lot more threatening to the portals than a tighter interpretation of kind of copyright and ownership laws. So
yeah. It'll be interesting to see how that, because the interesting thing is there's not just one type of data. There's data around what it's like to live in an area. There's data around what people are doing on a website. There's data around the actual listings themselves, and so on. So there's also multi levels of data, which at the end of the day, AI is far better off than most other people at pulling those various bits of data together into some sort of usable, intelligent, and insightful way to help whatever your use case is have a better experience. And I think that's actually, the more I'm thinking about this, the more I'm going, understanding all the use cases. And there's three of us, and there's going to be three different use cases. I'm guarantee if there was 50 of us on the call, there'd be pretty close to 50 different use cases around this. You can't as a portal design an experience for 50 different types of people. At the moment, we're all having basically the same vanilla experience.
Yeah, lowest common denominator.
Yeah, and I've got a feeling that that's where AI is going to really provide that benefit. Is going, well, hey, Mike, you're looking to invest in property. Well, here's your user experience customized
Right.
for you in a way that works for you. And you might be a visually driven. So there's two things. One is what you're trying to do, and the question is how you like to do it. I'm a visual person. You might be a textual person. Ed may be a voice driven person. Okay.
Mhm.
So there's so many different things that at the moment you have to be a form driven person, text based. You then look at images, and then you've got to fill another form out. Okay.
Mhm.
And if you don't like that process flow, don't go to any portal on the planet, because it's the same. So I
Right.
think it's, and plus you're then relying on whatever that portal's got on it, which is, apart from the US, is and in only a very few markets, is 100%. So I think that's where I think the value really comes over time. And
Okay, gents. We're kind of pushed for time, and I just heard that my son is home from his walk and crying in the background. So we're going to sum it
so
up
did
with one
we.
final question. One final question, Mike. We talk as an industry a lot about AI. Obviously, we talk a lot about things like super app and business models and all this. What do we as an industry not speak enough about?
The basic boring stuff, the stuff that really moves the needle. And the example that I talk about is just calling people back. Like, this is a relationship based industry. We talk about all these leads and all the technology and all the AI predictive analytics. You could throw $1 billion at it, but 50, in the US, 50% of the leads never get a response. 50 friggin' percent.
That's
And that,
crazy, right?
yeah, and I published something like that last year, and I hear from people, they're like, I did the same research 10 years ago and it was 50%. Like, it's not changing with all of this
Hey,
stuff.
but why is it not changing? Why is it, why? What I don't understand is if you're a real estate agent and you've had portals all over you for years going, you haven't answered, you haven't answered, you haven't answered, I'm going to give your lead to someone else.
I don't we don't have enough time to really unpack that. I don't have a simple answer as to why, other than, it's human beings, it's psychology, it's all this stuff that we're not talking about. And it's boring, right? Nobody, I kind of make the joke, right? Nobody attends a conference session titled Just Call People Back. It's not exciting. So, Ed, that's why we're not talking about it, because it doesn't sell tickets, right? What sells tickets is AI and, predictive analytics and machine learning and all this other fun stuff.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
that's a
would
good
I
answer.
would not, that would be where I end, right? We're, as an industry, we're just not talking about the really boring stuff that really matters to all of these businesses.
Yeah, good answer. Mike, thank you very much for joining us today. For anybody listening who doesn't already follow Mike, he is absolutely worth following on social media. Absolutely do read his analysis. Do listen to his podcast Context. It's all very good stuff. Thank you. And yeah, hopefully maybe see you in Madrid in the autumn.
To get out. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.